They knew there'd be danger, but they had to go. Welcome then. Our long-awaited journey begins today, and I'm so excited. It comes from a time of drought and hunger, when a village could not afford to send its warriors, and so trusted its future to two women instead, unlikely companions bound not by blood, but by necessity. This is a road story, a story of listening to the land, of choosing trust slowly, and of finding family where none was promised. Fill your tankards and let us begin. It began with a hollow echo where there had always been depth. The rope creaked, the bucket fell, and struck the hard earth. The last well had finally gone dry. The sky had stayed empty for weeks at a time, and summer had burned long that year. The river narrowed to a silver thread, and the land had grown too thin. Cattle pressed their muzzles to the mud. The fields bent their heads as if in shame. The villagers walked farther each morning for water, boots wearing new paths into the hills. Stones that had never seen the sun grew warm and pale. Sheep chewed bark and children learned to sip slowly. Fear hid itself poorly behind shorter tempers and guarded cups, in the way neighbors began counting what used to be shared without thought. The fields yellowed around their edges, and hope felt heavier than the buckets they carried. The elders said little, but they counted everything. They counted grain jars and found their bottoms too soon. They counted seeds and failing fields. They counted the men twice, once for the fields and once for the walls, because in dry years, hunger and violence walked the same roads. This was home. The graves were here. The walls were here. The stories were here. But here, the earth no longer provided for them. And when even the riverbed cracked beneath their feet, when dust rose where fish once flashed silver, the truth settled over them like ash. They could not wait for the sky to change. They would have to seek out a new land and start again. But who would go? The men were needed to guard what little remained, and to hold the soil together with their backs and bare hands. If the village weakened, others would come. Other hungry folk, other desperate folk, and then the land would take more than water. But this was no task for brute strength. This was a task for those who could speak to the land and see beyond the veil. 2 women were chosen. No one spoke when their names were said, and that silence meant approval and signaled the sacred trust of a desperate people. The first was Asa. She had been born during a frost that split trees and could communicate with the Lenvatir, the spirits of the land and sky. She spoke little, for she was often listening intently. The second was Ursa. She could read paths the way old women read bones by the firelight. Broken twigs, and leaning moss, and the fear left behind by passing things. She knew when a trail was being watched. She could run further than most men and vanish faster than a fallow deer. Her skills at trapping and tracking were unmatched amongst her generation. The pair had spoken fewer than a dozen words between them, though they were of the same age and the village was small. Neither argued the choice. They left before dawn with packs light enough to run in and charms heavy enough to matter. Asa carried a small stone wrapped in wool, warm even in the morning chill. Ursa carried a blade of folded iron, strong and reliable, with a wooden handle of blessed ash. The village watched without ceremony, Hope, when shown too openly, draws attention. The forest received them without greeting. The trees stood close, trunks thick with moss and memory. Light broke unevenly, turning the ground into a pattern that shifted as they walked. Asa went first, not because she was faster, but because the land answered her more readily when she faced it directly. She pressed her heel into the soil now and then, pausing just long enough to feel whether it yielded or resisted. Ursa followed, watching behind them, above them, and everywhere else Asa did not look. "You walk like you're apologizing," Ursa said after a time. Asa did not turn. "The ground remembers being walked on," she said. Ursa scoffed. Psh. They did not speak again for an hour. By midday, they found signs of others. Broken twigs reset poorly, and moss brushed the wrong way. Ursa crouched and traced a mark with 2 fingers. "Not hunters," she said. "Whatever it is moves without care for sound. Not settlers either. It's moving too fast." Asa frowned. "Fleeing?" Ursa responded. "Or chasing something that won't be caught." Neither was comforting. That night, they made no fire. The air was damp enough to carry sound, and the forest was the kind that noticed. They ate cold and slept in turns. When Ursa returned from her watch, she found Asa already awake, staring into the dark with the intensity of 1,000 pyres. "What is it?" Ursa asked. Asa didn't answer immediately. Then she said softly, "It's practicing." A voice drifted between the trees, too even, too careful. A man's voice, but wearing the words all wrong. "Help," it said. "I'm hurt, please." Asa's hand went to the stone in her pack, and the ground beneath her palm felt amused. "It's lying," Ursa whispered. "Yes," Asa said. "Badly." The voice came closer. Branches bent where no body passed. When it stepped into the faint light, it wore the suggestion of a man, as if it had been described to itself by someone who had only heard stories. Ursa stood slowly and smiled. And I'll see you next week for part 2.